Chapter 1 Foundations. Dominic Vance stared at the ceiling of his bedroom. His mind clear, but his body utterly unresponsive. The familiar weight of his wedding ring felt like a shackle against his immobilized finger. 38 years of life had taught him many lessons about trust and betrayal, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The medication had been administered an hour ago by a nurse, or at least someone claiming to be one. His wife, Vanessa, had insisted on the private care. "For your migraines," she'd said with that concerned look he once found endearing. Now her face loomed over him, those green eyes calculating rather than caring. The doctor said the medication might cause temporary paralysis. She explained, her voice honeyed with false concern. Her familiar vanilla perfume now seemed glowing, suffocating. Dominic had built his security business from nothing after returning from military service. Delta Force had trained him to detect threats, but he'd missed the one sleeping beside him for 15 years. His company, Sentinel Shield, provided elite security solutions to high-profile clients across the country. The irony wasn't lost on him. He protected others while remaining vulnerable himself. Their sprawling Scottsdale estate, with its state-of-the-art security system he designed himself, had become his prison. The desert sun streamed through partially closed blinds, casting jail-bar shadows across his immobile form. The bedroom door creaked open. Heavy footsteps approached, familiar yet jarringly out of place. Brendan Trask entered his field of vision. His childhood friend since 3rd grade, the best man at his wedding, and apparently his wife's lover. "Is he still breathing?" Brendan asked, his voice lacking the warmth that had once characterized their 4-decade friendship. Vanessa nodded, her chestnut hair catching the light. "Just long enough to sign these." She produced a stack of papers that Dominic recognized immediately: transfer documents for his company, property deeds, power of attorney forms. Everything he'd built over 2 decades. As they forced a pen between his rigid fingers, Dominic's mind raced through the warning signs he'd ignored. Hushed phone calls, unexplained absences, Vanessa's sudden interest in his business operations. His security expertise had failed him in his own home. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway preceded his mother-in-law's arrival. Phyllis Westbrook burst into the room, her usual composed demeanor replaced by frantic urgency. "Hurry up, we need his signature before the real nurse arrives," she hissed, her aristocratic features contorted with greed. The betrayal cut deep. Phyllis had never approved of him. The self-made security specialist wasn't good enough for her daughter from Connecticut old money, but to be actively involved in this conspiracy went beyond disapproval. Through his paralysis, Dominic noticed Vanessa's hand trembling slightly as she guided his fingers. Despite 15 years of marriage, she had never fully understood him. She didn't know about the neural implant he'd received during an experimental military program. A secret enhancement that now allowed him to control his heart rate and blood pressure while appearing completely incapacitated. More footsteps sounded in the hallway, lighter, quicker. Dominic recognized the pattern immediately. Lucy Fellows, his assistant of 8 years and the only person besides his late father who knew about his implant and its capabilities. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," Lucy called out, her voice carrying from the foyer. "The home health service said there was a scheduling mistake. They're sending the correct nurse now." Panic flashed across Vanessa's face as she locked eyes with Brendan. "They hadn't accounted for this. We need more time," Brendan muttered, reaching for something in his jacket pocket. A syringe filled with clear liquid. Dominic understood with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just about stealing his assets. They intended to kill him. Chapter 2 Deception's Web. 6 months earlier, Dominic had noticed the first thread loosening in the fabric of his marriage. A business trip to Phoenix had ended early, and he'd returned home to find the house empty despite Vanessa's assurance she would be spending the evening at her mother's charity gala. That night, he accessed the security footage, a habit born of professional paranoia, and found it to orgasm. Someone had disabled his own system. Someone who knew the bypass codes. Vanessa had always rolled her eyes at his security measures, calling them excessive. Now he wondered if she'd been paying closer attention than he realized. Dominic sat in his private office, staring at the elegantly framed photo from their wedding day. He remembered Brendan's best man speech, full of inside jokes and genuine affection. They've been inseparable since childhood, 2 boys from modest backgrounds and Riverside who'd sworn blood brotherhood at age 10. When Brendan's construction business had faltered 3 years ago, Dominic hadn't hesitated to inject capital. When Brendan's divorce had left him adrift, Dominic had offered him the guest house on their property. Looking at the golden days? Lucy asked, entering with his afternoon coffee black with a hint of cinnamon, just as he preferred. Lucy Fellows was efficiency personified, sharp, observant, and fiercely loyal. A former military intelligence officer herself, she joined Sentinel Shield after recovering from injuries sustained in Kandahar. Her analytical mind complemented Dominic's strategic thinking, making them a formidable professional team. Just thinking about loyalty, Dominic replied, accepting the cup. Have you completed the background check on that new client? Something felt off about him, Lucy said, placing a folder on his desk. His financials check out, but his references are too perfect. Nobody's that clean. Dominic nodded, appreciating her instincts. Dig deeper. People with nothing to hide don't work so hard to appear flawless. That evening, Dominic received a text from Brendan suggesting they meet at their old fishing spot by Lake Pleasant. The location choice struck him as odd. They hadn't been there in years. When he arrived at the secluded shoreline, Brendan was already there, a six-pack of their favorite beer chilling in a cooler. Thanks for coming on such short notice, Brendan said, his smile wide but his eyes not meeting Dominic's. Everything okay? Dominic asked, accepting a beer. Actually, I wanted to talk about Vanessa. Brendan replied, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I'm worried about her. Dominic felt a slight tension in his shoulders. What about her? She seems unhappy lately. Has she talked to you about feeling unfulfilled? About your long hours? The conversation continued with Brendan's subtly probing about Dominic's marriage and business. To anyone else it would have seemed like concerned friendship. To Dominic, with his training and detecting subterfuge, it felt like reconnaissance. Later that night, Dominic discreetly installed additional surveillance in his home, including the guest house where Brendan stayed. He told himself it was just professional caution, but deep down, suspicion had taken root. 2 weeks later, the footage revealed Vanessa entering the guest house at 1:43 a.m., not emerging until just before dawn. Dominic watched the betrayal unfold on his secure tablet, his face impassive but his knuckles white around the device. The next day, he received a call from his bank's fraud department about unusual requests to change the signatories on his business accounts. The call was followed by one from his attorney reporting inquiries about the conditions of his will and business succession plans. The web was tightening around him. Someone was laying groundwork, methodical, careful preparation to strip him of everything. That evening, during dinner with Vanessa, he casually mentioned feeling unusually fatigued lately and occasional severe migraines. Her response was too quick, too solicitous. You work too hard, Dom, she said, squeezing his hand. Maybe you should see Dr. Harmon again. Remember how he helped with your post-deployment issues? Dr. Harmon. The physician who had prescribed him sleeping medication last year, pills that had left him groggy and disoriented. Pills he'd stopped taking after a week without telling Vanessa. I've been thinking, Dominic said, watching her closely. Maybe it's time I updated my will. With the company's expansion, there's more at stake now. Something flashed in Vanessa's eyes. Anticipation quickly masked by practiced concern. Whatever you think is best, darling, she replied, reaching for the wine bottle. More Cabernet. That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, Dominic made a decision. He would allow their plan to unfold, but on his terms. Years of military operations had taught him that sometimes the best defense was to let the enemy believe they were succeeding. The next morning, he called Lucy into his office. I need you to execute Protocol Lazarus, he said quietly, using their code for the contingency plan they developed years ago, a protocol designed for the worst-case scenario of internal betrayal. Lucy's expression remained professional, but concern flickered in her eyes. Are you certain, sir? Completely, he replied. And Lucy? Trust no one but Hammond. Hammond Pierce was Dominic's oldest military contact. Now working as a private investigator specializing in cases too delicate for official channels. If anyone could unravel this conspiracy without alerting the conspirators, it was Hammond. Chapter 3: The Trap Springs. The week before his paralysis, Dominic meticulously laid his own trap while pretending to fall into theirs. He complained of increasingly severe migraines, agreed to Vanessa's suggestion of in-home medical care, and made a show of updating his estate documents with his attorney. Documents that appeared legitimate but contained hidden contingencies. Hammond's investigation had revealed the extent of the betrayal. Financial records showed Brendan had been hemorrhaging money for years. His construction business is shell for gambling debts. Vanessa had been making regular withdrawals from her personal accounts, accumulating cash that couldn't be traced. Most shocking was Phyllis Westbrook's involvement. Dominic's mother-in-law had leveraged her social connections to arrange introductions between Vanessa and a discreet fixer known for solving unfortunate marriages for wealthy women. The conspirators' plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use medication to render Dominic temporarily paralyzed but conscious, force him to sign documents transferring his assets, then administer a fatal dose that would appear as an accidental medication interaction. With his signature on the transfer documents and power of attorney forms, Vanessa would control everything. The medical examiner would find nothing suspicious, just an unfortunate reaction to prescribed medication in a man with a history of migraines and post-military stress. What they didn't know was that Dominic had been building an elaborate countermeasure. Each night, as Vanessa slept, he met with Hammond and Lucy in his soundproof garage office, compiling evidence and preparing legal documents of his own. On the morning of the planned betrayal, Dominic activated the neural implant's recording function. A military technology still classified and unknown to the civilian world. The implant would capture everything he saw and heard while appearing completely incapacitated. When the fake nurse, a woman Hammond had identified as Teresa Maddox, a former pharmaceutical rep with a suspended license, administered the medication, Dominic allowed his body to go limp. The drug was indeed a temporary paralytic, just as they planned. What they hadn't counted on was his ability to resist its full effects thanks to the neural implant's physiological regulation capabilities. Now, as he lay paralyzed on his bed with his wife, her lover, and his mother-in-law attempting to force his signature, Dominic was recording every moment, every incriminating word. "We don't have time for this," Brendan hissed, glancing nervously toward the hallway where Lucy's voice could still be heard. "Just forge his signature." "No," Vanessa replied sharply. "His attorney knows his signature too well. It has to be authentic. Besides, we're too far in to back out now." Phyllis paced by the foot of the bed, her expensive heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "This would have been unnecessary if you just divorced him properly. Vanessa, your father and I raised you to be smarter than this. Divorce would have given him time to hide assets," Vanessa snapped. "You know how careful he is. This is the only way to get everything." The bedroom door swung open fully and Lucy stood in the doorway, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the scene before her. Behind her stood a uniformed nurse, the legitimate one from the home health service. "What's going on here?" the nurse asked, confusion evident in her voice. "I'm Rosa Jimenez from Providence Home Health. I'm scheduled to check Mr. Vance's vitals and administer his medication. There's been a miscommunication." Vanessa stammered, quickly hiding the documents behind her back. "My husband's already received his medication. He's resting now." The nurse frowned, approaching the bed. "That's not possible. I have his prescribed medication here, and Providence has strict protocols about who can administer it." As the nurse moved toward Dominic, Brendan stepped forward aggressively. What happened next unfolded with startling speed. Lucy, with the reflexes of her military training, moved between Brendan and the nurse. "Sir, I need you to step back," she said firmly, her hand discreetly reaching into her jacket. In that moment of distraction, Phyllis made a desperate decision. She grabbed the syringe from Brendan's hand and lunged toward Dominic, intending to complete what they'd started. Dominic saw the syringe descending toward his arm. With monumental effort fighting against the paralytic, he managed to shift slightly, just enough for the needle to miss his vein and plunge into the mattress. The movement shocked everyone in the room. Dominic wasn't supposed to be able to move at all. "He's faking it," Brendan shouted, reaching for Dominic's throat. The bedroom door burst open again, this time revealing Hammond Pierce and two uniformed police officers. "Nobody moved," Hammond commanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of his former military rank. "Brendan Trask, Vanessa Vance, Phyllis Westbrook. You're being detained on suspicion of attempted murder and conspiracy." As the officers moved to secure the three conspirators, Lucy quickly administered the counteragent to the paralytic that Hammond had brought. Slowly, control returned to Dominic's limbs. Vanessa's face contorted with disbelief. "How? You were completely paralyzed. The drug should have..." "Should have what, Vanessa?" Dominic asked, his voice hoarse, but steady as he struggled to sit up. "Should have left me helpless while you stole everything I've built? Should have killed me. This is a misunderstanding," Phyllis interjected smoothly, years of social conditioning kicking in. "My daughter was simply concerned about her husband's health decisions. These documents are standard medical proxies." Hammond smiled coldly. Ma'am, we have weeks of recorded conversations between the three of you plotting this. Not to mention Miss Maddox, your fake nurse, who's already providing a full statement in exchange for leniency. As the officers led the three conspirators from the room, Vanessa locked eyes with Dominic one last time. You'll never prove anything, she hissed. It's your word against ours. Dominic, now able to sit up fully, met her gaze steadily. Actually, Vanessa, it's your words against you. Every moment since I entered this room has been recorded. He tapped his temple lightly. Some classified tech from my military days. You never did ask what I actually did in Delta. As realization dawned on Vanessa's face, Dominic felt no satisfaction. Only cold resolve. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. The trap had sprung, but the hunt was far from over. Chapter 4, Aftermath and Assessment. 48 hours after the failed attempt on his life, Dominic sat in the sterile interview room of the Scottsdale Police Department, completing his formal statement. Detective Alma Reeves, a 20-year veteran with weary eyes and a reputation for thoroughness, reviewed his account with methodical attention. Let me make sure I understand, Mr. Vance, she said, tapping her pen against her notepad. You suspected your wife, your best friend, and your mother-in-law were conspiring against you. So you allowed them to drug you and attempt to force your signature on legal documents. I needed irrefutable evidence, Dominic replied calmly. Suspicion isn't proof. Detective Reeves raised an eyebrow. Most people would have confronted their spouse or filed for divorce. Most people haven't seen how effectively wealth and connections can manipulate the system. Dominic countered. Phyllis Westbrook sits on the board of 6 major charities with the mayor, police commissioner, and 3 judges. I needed their actions to be so egregious that no amount of social influence could dismiss them. The detective's expression remained neutral, but Dominic caught the slight nod of understanding. Reeves had been in law enforcement long enough to know how privilege often superseded justice. And this recording device you mentioned. You're saying it captured everything while you were paralyzed? Hammond, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. The specifics of the technology are classified, detective, but I've provided you with authenticated audio and visual evidence through proper channels. The FBI's technical division has verified its authenticity. Hammond's involvement had escalated the case from local police to federal jurisdiction due to his connections and the nature of the conspiracy. What had begun as an attempted murder investigation now included charges of conspiracy, fraud, and the use of controlled substances in the commission of a crime. After completing his statement, Dominic exited the police station to find Lucy waiting by his car. Her posture alert despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. She barely left his side since the incident. Hammond's contact at the prosecutor's office called. She reported as they drove away. Initial bail hearing is tomorrow. Given the charges and Phyllis's connections, they're expecting bail to be granted but set high. Dominic nodded, his focus on the road. That's what we anticipated. Has Hammond finished the financial trace? Completed this morning, Lucy confirmed, consulting her tablet. Brendan's deeper than we thought, gambling debts to some dangerous people in Vegas, embezzlement from his company to offshore accounts under aliases. He's been planning this for at least 3 years. The timeline struck Dominic like a physical blow. 3 years. The betrayal had begun shortly after he'd helped Brendan restart his business following his divorce. And Vanessa. Lucy hesitated, clearly unsure how to soften what came next. She's been seeing him for almost 4 years. There's evidence they were involved before his marriage ended. Hammond found a joint safe deposit box registered under fake names. Inside was over $300,000 in cash, fake passports, and contingency plans in case their attempt on you failed. For years, nearly a third of their marriage. Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the only external sign of his inner turmoil. The good news, Lucy continued, is that the emergency protocols we activated protected all your assets. Sentinel Shield is secure. The property transfers you initiated last month are complete, and the offshore contingency funds are untouched. They arrived at a modest hotel on the outskirts of Scottsdale, an unremarkable establishment chosen specifically because it wasn't the type of place anyone would expect Dominic fans to stay. His home was now a crime scene, and even if it weren't, he had no desire to return to the space where his wife had attempted to end his life. In his hotel room, Dominic stood by the window watching the desert sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The beauty seemed almost offensive given the darkness of his thoughts. What's our next move? Lucy asked, setting up her laptop at the small desk. We let the legal process unfold. Dominic replied, but we don't rely on it for justice. Lucy looked up, understanding the implication. Protocol service? Dominic nodded. Protocol service, named after the mythological three-headed dog that guarded the gates of Hades, was their most comprehensive contingency plan, designed to systematically dismantle an adversary's life on multiple fronts simultaneously. Start with the financial angle. He instructed, I want to understand every cent they've moved over the past 5 years. Then their communications, all of them, not just what they thought was secure, and I want to know who else is involved. You think there are more players? Lucy asked, already typing. Vanessa and Brendan aren't sophisticated enough to orchestrate this alone. Dominic said, the medication, the timing, the legal documents. This required expertise they don't possess. Phil has provided the connections, but someone else provided the expertise. That night, as Lucy coordinated with Hammond to begin implementing protocol service, Dominic reviewed everything he knew about the 3 people who had betrayed him. He'd spent his career analyzing threats and vulnerabilities, but he'd failed to see the danger within his own home. Vanessa had come from Connecticut old money. The Westbrooks were known for their social prominence rather than their wealth, which had been dwindling for generations. Vanessa had been raised to maintain appearances at all costs. Her marriage to Dominic had shocked her social circle. She was supposed to marry someone from her world, not a self-made military man with no pedigree. Brendan had been his brother in all but blood since childhood. They'd survived foster care together after Dominic lost his parents, had joined the military together, had sworn to always have each other's backs. While Dominic had thrived in Delta Force, Brendan had been discharged after an injury. The divergence in their paths had begun there, Dominic building Sentinel Shield while Brendan struggled with civilian life, making one bad decision after another. Phyllis Westbrook had never hidden her disappointment in her daughter's choice of husband, but she had hidden her financial desperation. Hammond's initial investigation had revealed that the Westbrook fortune had been depleted years ago, with Phyllis maintaining the illusion of wealth through increasingly risky investments and loans against family properties. All 3 had motives beyond simple greed. Vanessa wanted freedom without losing status. Brendan wanted redemption and revenge for living in Dominic's shadow. Phyllis wanted to restore her family's fading legacy. Understanding their motives was crucial for what came next, because Dominic wasn't just seeking legal justice. He was planning complete devastation. Chapter 5, Count of Moves. The preliminary hearing took place 3 weeks after the failed attempt on Dominic's life. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. The case had captured public attention, a salacious tale of betrayal among Scottsdale's elite. Dominic entered through a side door, accompanied by Hammond and his attorney, Marissa Gallegos, a formidable litigator known for her meticulous preparation and ruthless courtroom tactics. Lucy remained outside, coordinating with their security team. Death threats had begun arriving shortly after the case made headlines. Some from unknown sources, others from associates of Brendan's gambling connections who feared his testimony might implicate them. Inside the courtroom, Dominic's gaze met Vanessa's for the first time since her arrest. She sat beside her high-profile defense attorney. Her appearance carefully cultivated to project vulnerability, subtle makeup that emphasized her fatigue, a conservative navy dress that suggested seriousness rather than her usual designer flair. When she saw Dominic, something flickered in her eyes. Not remorse, but calculation. Brendan, seated at a separate table with his own counsel, looked hollowed out. Prison had not been kind to him. His usually confident posture was slumped, his eyes darting nervously around the courtroom. When he noticed Dominic, he quickly looked away. Phyllis, meanwhile, maintained her aristocratic bearing despite the orange jumpsuit. She sat ramrod straight. Her expression one of indignant suffering, as though the proceedings were an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. Judge Sandra Whitfield entered the courtroom, her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency preceding her. As the proceedings began, the prosecution outlined their case. The physical evidence, the testimony of the fake nurse who had turned state's witness, and the recordings from Dominic's neural implant. When the defense attorneys moved to have the recordings declared inadmissible, citing privacy laws and questionable provenance, Hammond discreetly passed a note to Marissa. After reading it, she rose with newfound confidence. Your Honor, Mr. Pierce has just informed me that the Department of Defense has authorized disclosure of classified information pertaining to the recording device. A representative from the DoD is present and prepared to testify to its legality. This unexpected development visibly rattled the defense. The involvement of the Department of Defense elevated the case beyond what they had prepared for. By the end of the hearing, bail had been set, $2 million each for Vanessa and Brendan. $5 million for Phyllis due to her greater flight risk given her international connections. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. As Dominic left the courthouse, a slender man in an immaculate suit fell into step beside him. "Mr. Vance," the man said quietly, not looking at him directly. "My name is Adrian Frost. I represent certain parties who had business arrangements with Mr. Trask. These parties are concerned about what information might emerge during trial." Dominic kept walking, giving no indication that the implied threat affected him. "Your certain parties should be more concerned about their own exposure. I have no interest in Brendan's gambling debts unless they're relevant to the attempt on my life." "Of course," Frost replied smoothly. "However, my clients would appreciate some assurance of your discretion. They're prepared to make it worth your while." Dominic stopped, turning to face the man fully. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Frost. I don't respond well to threats or bribes. If your clients stay out of my way, they stay off my radar. If not," he left the consequence unspoken. Frost's composed facade cracked slightly, a micro-expression of unease crossing his features. "I'll convey your message." That evening, in the secure operations room they established at Sentinel Shield's headquarters, Dominic, Lucy, and Hammond reviewed their progress. "Vanessa made bail this afternoon," Hammond reported. "Phyllis is still processing. Brendan's attorney is still trying to secure funds." "What about the fourth conspirator?" Dominic asked, studying the network diagram displayed on the wall screen. A complex web of connections linking Vanessa, Brendan, and Phyllis to various associates. Lucy highlighted a note on the diagram. "Dr. Julian Reynolds. He's the connection we've been looking for. Harvard-educated neurologist, respected researcher, and apparently deeply in debt due to a messy divorce. He provided the paralytic drug and advised on dosage. No direct contact with any of our 3 principals. All communication went through this woman." She enlarged another note. "Petra Klein, Phyllis's personal assistant for the past 2 years. What's his exposure?" Dominic asked. "Significant," Hammond replied. "He's currently chief of neurology at Phyllis Memorial. If his involvement becomes public, he loses his medical license. His position possibly is freedom." Dominic studied the man's profile. "Make contact. Offer him at choice. Complete cooperation or complete destruction." While Hammond handled Dr. Reynolds, Dominic focused on Vanessa. Now out on bail, she had moved in with a college friend in Paradise Valley, a wealthy enclave adjacent to Scottsdale. Surveillance confirmed she was adhering to her bail conditions but also showed frequent visits from her attorney and several unidentified individuals. Through discreet financial intelligence gathering, methods hovering at the edge of legality, Lucy discovered that Vanessa had been emptying accounts Dominic hadn't even known existed. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland that predated their marriage. Old Westbrook money that wasn't so depleted after all, Lucy explained, or at least, money they kept hidden from creditors. "Phyllis has been moving assets offshore for decades. Can we touch it?" Dominic asked. "Legally?" "No," Hammond replied. "But there are other approaches." The next phase of protocol service involved financial pressure, subtle, devastating, and impossible to trace back to Dominic. Hammond's contacts in banking regulation flagged the suspicious movement of funds, triggering automatic freezes. Lucy's cyber expertise revealed data suggesting tax evasion resulting in IRS audits. Financial institutions that had long extended preferential treatment to the Westbrook name suddenly found regulatory reasons to distance themselves. Within 2 weeks, Phyllis's bail was in jeopardy as her collateral assets came under scrutiny. Vanessa found her credit cards declined and her banking access restricted. Brendan, still unable to make bail, received notice that his legal defense fund was under investigation for fraud. But Dominic knew financial pressure alone wasn't enough. Protocol service required isolating the targets from their support systems. "What do we have on Vanessa's social circle?" he asked during their daily strategy session. Lucy pulled up a comprehensive social network analysis. Her closest allies are these 4 women, all connected to Scottsdale's elite social scene, all with secrets they don't want exposed, such as Caroline Abbott, affair with her daughter's tennis coach, Diana Reynolds, prescription drug addiction hidden from her husband, Meredith Shaw, Family Foundation, misusing charitable funds. Taylor Bennett, husband's business laundering money for Mexican cartels. Dominic considered the information. No direct action against them. Anonymous tips to the right authorities for Bennett and Shaw. For the others, just make sure Vanessa knows we know. Let her wonder if she can trust them. The strategy worked with ruthless efficiency. Within days, Vanessa's social support began to erode. Friends made excuses to avoid her calls. Invitations were rescinded. The social isolation was particularly devastating for someone whose identity was built around her social standing. Meanwhile, Dr. Reynolds had chosen cooperation. In exchange for immunity from prosecution and financial compensation to rebuild his life elsewhere. He provided detailed testimony about his role in the conspiracy and turned over all communication with Petra Klein. He claims he was told it was for a mercy euthanasia. Hammond reported with distaste. Vanessa apparently convinced Klein that you had a degenerative neurological condition and wanted to end your life on your terms, but needed help because of religious family members who would contest a formal end-of-life decision. A convenient fiction to salvage conscience. Dominic remarked coldly, "What about Klein? Former intelligence operative, private sector now. Specializes in reputation management for wealthy clients. Which apparently includes coordinating murder plots. Find her weakness." Dominic instructed. Everyone has won. As Protocol Cerberus continued methodically dismantling the lives and support networks of those who had betrayed him, Dominic maintained his public composure. To the outside world, he was the dignified victim allowing the justice system to work. He gave no interviews, made no public statements beyond the minimum required by the legal proceedings. In private, however, he was the architect of a revenge so comprehensive it bordered on biblical. Every aspect of his betrayers' lives was under assault. Their finances, their reputations, their relationships, their future prospects. And they still had no idea how far his reach extended or how meticulous his planning had been. Chapter 6, Pressure Points. 4 months after the attack, as the trial data approached, Dominic intensified the pressure. Protocol Cerberus entered its final phase, direct psychological warfare. The pressure began with Brendan, still incarcerated and increasingly desperate as his legal options narrowed. His attorney, facing his own troubles after anonymous ethics complaints to the state bar, had suggested a plea deal. The prosecution, armed with Dr. Reynolds' testimony and forensic evidence, was disinclined to offer leniency. Dominic arranged for a visit to Brendan at the detention center. They sat opposite each other in the Stark visitation room. The years of friendship between them turned to ash. "You look like hell," Dominic observed dispassionately. Brendan's once robust frame had diminished. His complexion grave beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. "What do you want, Dom?" "Come to gloat." "I came to understand," Dominic replied. 35 years of friendship, and you were willing to watch me die. I want to know when it started. When you decided I deserved to die. Brendan's eyes darted away, unable to hold Dominic's steady gaze. It wasn't supposed to go that far at first. Just the company, some assets, something to solve my problems, and sleeping with my wife. Was that just about solving your problems, too? A flush of anger briefly animated Brendan's features. You had everything done. Everything always came easy to you. Military success, business success, the perfect house, the perfect wife. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow for decades? Dominic leaned forward slightly. I had everything because I built it. Brendan. I came back from deployment with PTSD and nightmares that still wake me up screaming, but I got help and kept moving forward. I started sending them Shield with a loan and one client. I worked 18-hour days for years. Nothing came easy. Your wife did. Brendan replied with a hint of his old defiance. Vanessa was looking for an exit strategy before I ever touched her. She married you for stability, not love. She told me everything. How you were emotionally unavailable, how your military background made you controlling, how she felt trapped in a beautiful prison. The words were calculated to wound, but Dominic had anticipated them. And you believe that's who I am? After knowing me your entire life. Something shifted in Brendan's expression, a flicker of the conscience that had once guided him. I believed what I needed to believe. Dominic nodded, understanding completely. I have a proposition for you, Brendan. Full confession, all details, complete cooperation against Vanessa and Phyllis. In exchange, I'll have my attorneys suggest leniency to the prosecutor. Hope and suspicion warred on Brendan's face. Why would you help me? I'm not. Dominic replied coldly. I'm offering you a choice between bad and worse. Cooperate, get 20 years instead of life. Refuse and I'll make sure you never see daylight again. He stood to leave, but Brendan's voice stopped him. There's more you don't know, Dom. About why Phyllis was so desperate. About what Vanessa has planned if this fails. Dominic turned back. Tell me. Not without guarantees, Brendan countered. A glimpse of his old cunning emerging. Written agreements signed by the DA. You're not in a position to negotiate. Dominic reminded him. Everyone's in a position to negotiate when they have information someone else needs. Brendan replied. Especially when that information involves a kill switch. Dominic concealed his concern. Explain. Insurance, Brendan said simply. If Vanessa goes down, certain information gets released. Information that would destroy what's left of your life. Give me the deal and I'll tell you everything. After leaving the detention center, Dominic briefed Hammond and Lucy on the conversation. It could be a bluff. Hammond suggested as they drove back to Sinnel Shield headquarters. It's not. Dominic replied. I know Vanessa. She'd never enter a high-risk situation without an escape route. And Brendan wouldn't have mentioned it if he couldn't deliver. What kind of information could be damaging enough to serve as effective insurance? Lucy wondered. Your military record is exemplary. Your business dealings are clean. And the attack on you has generated public sympathy. What could they possibly release that would change that narrative? Something manufactured. Dominic concluded. Something convincing enough to create doubt. To tarnish my credibility as a victim. We need to find it before it's activated. Their focus shifted to identifying this potential kill switch. Lucy coordinated with their cyber team to monitor all known accounts and communications associated with Vanessa and her allies. Hammond activated his network of informants in legal and financial circles seeking any unusual document filings or contingency arrangements. Meanwhile, Dominic turned his attention to Phyllis Westbrook, whose bail had been revoked after evidence emerged of her attempting to liquidate assets in violation of the court's conditions. Now in detention awaiting trial, the family matriarch was experiencing conditions far removed from her privileged existence. Unlike his confrontation with Brendan, Dominic didn't visit Phyllis directly. Instead, he arranged for her to learn of her rapidly deteriorating circumstances through her increasingly frantic attorney. The Westbrook family estate in Connecticut, held for 7 generations, was now under foreclosure due to previously hidden liens being exposed. The family's art collection, supposedly secured in a free port in Geneva, had been seized by Swiss authorities investigating tax fraud. The Westbrook Foundation, the family's philanthropic vehicle and Phyllis's main source of social standing, was under investigation by the IRS for fiscal irregularities. She's requested a meeting, Hammond reported 2 days later, through channels suggesting she wants to make a deal. Deny it, Dominic replied. Let her stew another week, while Brendan and Phyllis faced the direct consequences of their actions. Vanessa remained the most dangerous adversary, intelligent, adaptable, and still possessing resources they hadn't identified. Despite the mounting pressure, she maintained her public composure, presenting herself as a devoted wife wrongfully accused. She's planning something, Dominic told Lucy during their morning briefing. The social isolation, the financial pressure, she's enduring it too calmly. She's made 3 visits to a safe deposit box at First National that we couldn't get access to. Lucy noted, reviewing their surveillance reports. And she's had 7 meetings with this man. She displayed a photograph of a severe-looking man in his 50s. Walter Dawson, former litigation attorney, now specializes in crisis management for high-profile clients. Find out everything about Dawson, Dominic instructed. Every client, every case, every strategy he's ever employed. That afternoon, as Dominic reviewed security protocols for an upcoming client meeting, his secure phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Vance, a woman's voice said when he answered. This is Petra Klein. I believe we have matters to discuss. Dominic's pulse quickened, though his voice remained steady. Miss Klein, I've been expecting your call. I doubt that, she replied with professional detachment. But circumstances have evolved. I find my current client's interest no longer aligned with my own. You mean now that Phyllis can't pay your fees, you're looking for a new employer? A slight pause. Let's call it a realignment of priorities. I have information that would interest you. Information about Vanessa's contingency plan. The kill switch Brendan mentioned. Dominic stated rather than asked. So he told you. Not the details, I presume, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. What do you want? Immunity from prosecution, naturally. In reasonable compensation for my services. In exchange, I neutralize the threat and provide all relevant information about operations I coordinated for the Westbrooks. Why should I trust you? Klein's laugh was devoid of humor. You shouldn't. But you should recognize a superior tactical position when you see one. Vanessa's plan activates automatically if certain conditions are met. Her arrest, her conviction, her unexplained disappearance. You can continue dismantling her life, Mr. Vance. And yes, I'm aware of your operations. But without my intervention, her final move still executes. Protocol service had always accounted for the possibility of turncoats among the conspirators. Dominic had anticipated Petra Klein's eventual approach. What he hadn't anticipated was the urgency in her tone, the subtle indication that time was running short. Meet me at the Sentinel Shield office in 2 hours. He instructed. Come alone or not at all. After ending the call, Dominic immediately contacted Hammond. Klein made contact. She's coming in. Implement Persephone protocols. Project Persephone, named for the goddess force to divide her time between the underworld and the surface. Was their strategy for turning an adversary's agent? It involved a careful balance of verified information, controlled deception, and calculated risk. When Klein arrived at Sentinel Shield, she found herself escorted to a conference room where Dominic waited with Lucy and Hammond. No attorneys. No recording devices visible. A deliberate choice to suggest openness while concealing their true precautions. Klein was exactly as her dossier had described. Mid-40s, immaculately groomed, with the alert posture of someone trained to identify threats. Her expression revealed nothing as she took the offered seat. Let's dispense with pleasantries, she began. Vanessa has arranged for the release of documents suggesting you physically abused her throughout your marriage. Medical records, photographic evidence, witness statements, all fabricated but convincingly so. These materials have been placed with 5 different media outlets and 2 law enforcement agencies to be released when a dead man's switch is triggered. What's the trigger mechanism? Hammond asked. Klein's gaze remained on Dominic. Digital, an application requiring Vanessa to enter a code every 72 hours. If she fails, the materials release automatically. There are also manual triggers she can activate if she feels threatened. And you can neutralize this? Dominic asked. I designed it, Klein replied with professional pride. I can dismantle it, but I need access to her devices, which means getting close to her without raising suspicion. Why betray your client now? Lucy asked, her skepticism evident. Klein's expression hardened slightly. The Westbrooks hired me to manage a delicate divorce settlement, perhaps with some financial maneuvering to protect assets. When it escalated to attempted murder, I should have walked away. Professional error on my part. I'm correcting that error. The explanation rang true, but Dominic hadn't survived in high-risk operations by taking explanations at face value. Project Persephone required verification at every step. Here's what happens, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You get provisional immunity contingent on your complete cooperation and the successful neutralization of the threat. You provide detailed information on the dead man's switch. All triggers. All destinations for the information. We verify what we can independently. If it checks out, we proceed with the next phase. Klein reviewed the documents. Her expression revealing nothing. Acceptable. But we need to move quickly. Vanessa suspects her inner circle has been compromised. She's accelerating her plans. What plans? Hammond asked sharply. Klein looked up from the papers. She's preparing to flee. Private charter to Jakarta. Then overland to a property held under a shell corporation. Departure scheduled for 36 hours from now. The timeline changed everything. If Vanessa escaped U.S. jurisdiction with access to hidden resources, the entire strategy would be compromised. As Klein provided details of the dead man's switch and Vanessa's escape plan, Dominic mentally recalibrated protocol service. The endgame was approaching faster than anticipated, but the fundamental principle remained unchanged: complete systematic destruction of those who had betrayed him. By the end of the meeting, a new operation was taking shape. One that would bring all the pressure points to bear simultaneously, forcing his adversaries into their final fatal mistakes. Chapter 7. Convergence. The morning of Vanessa's plan to escape dawned clear and hot. The Arizona sky a merciless blue. In a luxury hotel suite converted into an operations center, Dominic reviewed the final preparations with his team. The walls were covered with timelines, photographs, and network diagrams. A comprehensive map of the trap they had laid. Klein's information checks out. Hammond confirmed, tapping his tablet to display surveillance photos. Private hangar booked at Scottsdale Airport. Flight plan filed for San Diego, but with a suspicious amount of fuel for that distance. And the dead man's switch? Dominic asked. Lucy gestured to a complex diagram on her laptop. Confirmed. Multiple redundant triggers, sophisticated distribution system. Klein provided the access codes as promised. We can neutralize it, but we need physical access to Vanessa's primary device for at least 3 minutes. Which she keeps with her at all times, Hammond added grimly. Dominic studied the operational timeline. Then we ensure she's separated from it. Operation proceeds as planned. Initiate Phase 1. Phase 1 began with coordinated legal pressure. At precisely 9 a.m. Brendan Trass's attorney filed a comprehensive cooperation agreement with the district attorney's office, providing detailed testimony implicating Vanessa and Phyllis in the murder plot. Simultaneously, Heeman's contact at the FBI submitted an application for an emergency arrest warrant based on new evidence of interstate conspiracy and flight risk. By 10:30 a.m. digital news alerts about Brendan's cooperation agreement began reaching Vanessa's monitor devices. Surveillance teams reported immediate reaction, urgent phone calls, hasty packing accelerated. She's moved up the timeline, reported the surveillance lead through the secure communication channel. New departure scheduled for 1 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. at 11:15 a.m. Phase 2 activated. Acting on anonymous tips, IRS criminal investigation units arrived at Phyllis's attorney's office with subpoenas for all Westbrook family financial records. Simultaneously, Walter Dawson, Vanessa's crisis manager, received an unexpected visit from State Bar investigators responding to ethics complaints. Most critically, the pilot scheduled for Vanessa's escape flight was detained by Customs and Border Protection for routine questioning about irregularities in his flight logs. A backup pilot would take hours to arrange. She's panicking, Lucy noted, monitoring the intercepts of Vanessa's communications. 3 calls to Klein in the last hour, all unanswered. 2 calls to backup contacts who are either unavailable or unwilling to help. By noon, Vanessa's carefully constructed exit strategy was unraveling. Surveillance reported her leaving her friend's Paradise Valley home in her personal vehicle rather than the arranged car service. A critical deviation from her security protocols. She's heading towards Scottsdale Quarter, Hammond reported, tracking her movement via the surveillance team, likely meeting someone for assistance. Klein was right, Dominic observed. When pressured, she falls back on limited trusted resources. Implement Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most delicate direct interception. As Vanessa parked at the upscale outdoor shopping center, Lucy activated her part of the operation, approaching Vanessa in the guise of a hairy chopper. Through the surveillance feed, Dominic watched Lucy accidentally collide with Vanessa near the entrance to a boutique, sending shopping bags and Vanessa's purse scattering across the pavement. "I'm so sorry," Lucy exclaimed, helping gather the spilled items while subtly palming Vanessa's phone and replacing it with an identical decoy. "Watch where you're going," Vanessa snapped, snatching her purse back and storming away. Lucy calmly walked in the opposite direction, the real phone secured in her jacket pocket. "Package acquired," she confirmed through her concealed microphone. 3 minutes to neutralize the switch, then we return it. While Lucy worked with their technical team to deactivate the dead man's switch, Dominic prepared for the final confrontation. Vanessa's deviation from her escape plan had created the perfect opportunity. She was isolated, off balance, and without her usual safeguards. The return of the phone was executed with similar precision. A different team member posing as a boutique sales associate found the phone Vanessa had dropped while shopping and returned it to her with professional courtesy. Vanessa, distracted by her collapsing plans, didn't notice the brief absence of her device. With the dead man's switch neutralized, the final phase began. Dominic personally placed a call to Vanessa's phone. Through the surveillance feed, he watched her expression change as she recognized the number. First surprise, then calculation. "Dominic," she answered, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" he replied. "You're running Vanessa. It won't work." A careful glance around the busy shopping center. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm shopping for a new life in Indonesia with resources you think I don't know about." He let the implications sink in. Brendan is cooperating with prosecutors. Pline has disappeared. Your mother's assets are frozen. Your escape pilot is being questioned by federal agents. It's over. A flicker of genuine fear crossed her face before she controlled it. You're bluffing. You don't have the reach or resources for all that. The man in the black polo shirt by the fountain is with Hammond's team. The woman with the stroller near the escalator is FBI. The security guard by the north entrance works for me. You have nowhere to go. Now the fear was unmistakable as Vanessa confirmed these details with quick glances. What do you want? Meet me. One conversation before this ends. You owe me that much. She laughed. A brutal sound. I owe you nothing. And I still have insurance you don't know about. Your dead man switch. Deactivated 20 minutes ago. Pline designed it. Remember? She also knew how to dismantle it. The color drained from Vanessa's face. That's impossible. 1 hour, Vanessa. The Japanese garden at the Botanical Gardens. Come alone. Or the next people to approach you will be federal agents with an arrest warrant for flight to avoid prosecution. After ending the call, Dominic turned to Hammond. Is everything in place? Hammond nodded. Full surveillance coverage. Teams positioned at all exits. Federal agents on standby. She can't escape. And any recording of your conversation will be disrupted by our countermeasures. The Japanese Friendship Garden at the Desert Botanical Gardens offered what Dominic needed. Public enough to make violence impractical, private enough for an uninterrupted conversation, and controlled access points for security. He arrived early, passing through the garden's curved pathways to the pre-selected location. A secluded bench near a small stone bridge crossing a koi pond. The tranquility of the setting stood in stark contrast to the confrontation to come. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, her composure partially restored. She wore large sunglasses despite the shade of the garden, her posture rigid with tension. You've changed the rules of engagement, she said without preamble, remaining standing rather than joining him on the bench. This wasn't supposed to get so messy. Attempted murder tends to complicate things. Dominic replied evenly. Sit down, Vanessa. This won't take long. After a moment's hesitation, she sat, maintaining distance between them. So what now? You turn me into your FBI friends? Destroy what's left of my reputation? Haven't you done enough? Enough. Dominic allowed genuine incredulity to color his tone. You tried to kill me, Vanessa. After 15 years of marriage, you and my best friend plan my death while sleeping in my home, eating meals across from me, looking me in the eye day after day. And you think my response has been excessive. You never saw me, she said, an edge of bitterness in her voice. Not really. I was an accessory to your perfect life, the suitable wife for a rising security consultant with military credentials, someone presentable for client dinners and charity functions. Is that how you justified it to yourself? That I deserve to die because I didn't appreciate you enough? Vanessa removed her sunglasses, meeting his gaze directly. I wanted out Dominic. A clean break, a new start. But your prenuptial agreement would have left me with almost nothing compared to what you've built. Divorce meant social exile, financial constraints, starting over at 40 with no career and no prospects. So instead of asking for a fair settlement, you decided murder was the better option. It wasn't my first choice, she countered, as if discussing a minor disagreement. But when Brendan came to me with his financial troubles, when my mother revealed how desperate the family situation had become, it seemed like the cleanest solution for everyone. The calculated coldness of her reasoning struck Dominic more profoundly than any emotional outburst could have. This woman who had shared his bed, his name, his life for 15 years had weighed his existence against her convenience and found it wanting. I have one question, he said finally. Were there ever real feelings between us, or was it all calculation from the beginning? Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes, perhaps the ghost of genuine emotion. The first 2 years were real. Maybe 3, before I realized that your work would always come first, that your nightmares and hypervigilance would never truly fade, that the ambitious soldier I married had become a fortress no one could breach. Dominic absorbed this, recognizing the partial truth within her justification. The PTSD from his military service had indeed created barriers, but her response had never been to help him lower them, only to seek fulfillment elsewhere, while maintaining the facade of their marriage. Here's what happens next, he said, his decision made long before this meeting. The federal arrest warrant is already being processed. Brendan's testimony has given prosecutors everything they need. Klein has provided evidence of your contingency planning that constitutes additional charges. Your mother's financial dealings have triggered investigations that will continue for years. Vanessa's momentary vulnerability hardened into resolve. You thought of everything having you? The perfect revenge. Not revenge. Dominic corrected her. Justice. With one addition, he removed an envelope from his jacket and placed it between them on the bench. This contains evidence of an offshore account in your name only. $15 million. Enough to start over even after legal fees. The account information has been anonymously provided to the prosecutor's office. They'll find it within the week. Confusion crossed Vanessa's features. I don't have an offshore account with $15 million. You do now. Dominic replied. Created last month, funded through a network of shells impossible to trace to me. With transaction records suggesting regular deposits over the past 5 years. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're framing me for embezzlement on top of everything else. Not just embezzlement. The transaction patterns suggest money laundering for elements that would interest several federal agencies. The kind of charges that add decades to his sentence. Why? She asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. You've already won. I'm facing attempted murder charges. Why add this? Dominic stood, looking down at the woman he had once loved. Because you were right about one thing, Vanessa. I am a fortress, and those who breach my walls don't just fail. They cease to exist. As he walked away, leaving her alone on the bench with the envelope, he heard federal agents approaching from the garden entrance. Their timing, like everything else in this operation, had been precisely calculated. The satisfaction he felt wasn't joy or even relief. It was the cold certainty of a mission completed with absolute precision. Protocol Cerberus had reached its conclusion. His betrayers would face not just legal justice, but complete annihilation of everything they valued. It was, he reflected as he exited the garden, exactly the outcome he had designed. Chapter 8. Revelations. The trial became a media sensation. A true crime narrative featuring wealthy socialites, betrayal, and attempted murder. Dominic's testimony, delivered with military precision and unwavering composure, painted a damning picture of the conspiracy. The neural implant recordings, admitted as evidence after Department of Defense authentication, left no room for reasonable doubt. Brendan Trask, in exchange for a reduced sentence, provided exhaustive details of the plot's evolution. From initial discussions about forcing Dominic out of his company to the final plan for his elimination. His testimony revealed the calculated nature of their betrayal, including how they had exploited Dominic's PTSD to justify medicating him and eventually planning his death. Most devastating was the testimony of Dr. Julian Reynolds, who detailed his role in providing the paralytic medication and advising on dosages. His clinical description of how the drug would render Dominic conscious but helpless, able to witness his own murder without intervention, sent ripples of horror through the courtroom. Phyllis Westbrook, facing the collapse of her family's legacy and reputation, attempted to present herself as a concerned mother manipulated by her daughter and Brendan. The strategy failed spectacularly when prosecutors introduced recordings of her instructing Petro Klein on how to ensure no loose ends remained. Throughout the proceedings, Dominic maintained his public image as the dignified victim seeing justice served. He gave no interviews, made no statements outside the courtroom, and showed no visible reaction to even the most shocking testimony. In private, however, he monitored every development with strategic attention. Each day after court, he met with Hammond and Lucy to assess the impact of testimony and adjust their ongoing operations. Protocol Cerberus continued its work outside the courtroom, systematically dismantling the remaining resources and contingency plans of his betrayers. On the trial's 15th day, as Dominic prepared to leave the courthouse after particularly damning testimony from Vanessa's former assistant, he was approached by an elderly man he recognized immediately despite never having met him. Mr. Vance, the man said, his bearing military despite his advanced age. Harold Trask, Brendan's father. Dominic had known Harold Trask only through Brendan's rare mentions, a decorated Vietnam veteran who had disowned his son after a dishonorable discharge from the army. The elder Trask had never attended their childhood events, Brendan's wedding, or any significant moment in his son's life that Dominic had witnessed. Mr. Trask, Dominic acknowledged with a respectful nod. This is unexpected. For both of us, the older man agreed, his weathered face and passive. I've been following the trial. What my son did. He paused, military discipline containing whatever emotion might have surfaced. There's no excuse, but I wanted you to know he wasn't always like this. The boy you knew as a child, the one who stood by you when your parents died, that was the real Brendan. Somewhere along the way he lost himself. Dominic studied the man who had been absent throughout Brendan's formative years. With all due respect, sir, you forfeited any right to speak about who Brendan really is when you abandoned him at 15. A flash of pain crossed Harold's features. You're right. My failures as a father contributed to what he became. I can't change that, but I wanted to tell you something he might not have mentioned in his testimony. Dominic's security team hovered nearby, alert to any potential threat, but he waved him back slightly. Go on. After his injury when he was discharged, he came to me, asked for help getting back on his feet. I turned him away. The admission clearly caused the old soldier. He told me then that you were the only person who'd ever stood by him. The only person he could count on. Whatever twisted him against you happened after that, and I suspect it was seeing everything you achieved while he struggled. The information wasn't tactically useful, but it provided context Dominic hadn't previously considered. Brendan's betrayal might have been fueled not just by financial desperation and Vanessa's manipulation, but by the corrosive effect of comparison, watching his childhood friend succeed while he failed. Why tell me this now? Dominic asked. Harold Trask straightened, his military bearing more pronounced. Because you deserve to know that your friendship meant something before it was betrayed. And because I need to acknowledge my part in creating the man who tried to destroy you. He extended his hand. I won't ask your forgiveness for him, but I wanted to show my respect for how you've handled this. With honor. After a moment's consideration, Dominic accepted the handshake, not out of forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the older man's courage in confronting his own failures. That evening, as the trial entered its final phase, Dominic found himself reflecting on Harold Trask's words while reviewing evidence in his temporary apartment. The space was sparsely furnished but highly secure, a fortress within a fortress with systems designed by Lucy based on his specifications. The ringing of his secure phone interrupted his thoughts. The caller ID showed Hammond's number. We have a situation. Hammond said without preamble when Dominic answered. Brendan Trask was found dead in his cell an hour ago. Parent suicide. Dominic absorbed this information, calculating its implications for the trial and their overall strategy. Details. Hanging. No note. Preliminary investigation suggests he used materials from his commissary packages. Prison officials are treating it as self-inflicted, but given the circumstances, it's too convenient. Dominic concluded. Someone wanted him silenced before cross-examination could reveal additional details. Find out who had access to him in the past 48 hours. Any unusual visitors, guard changes, deviations from routine. After ending the call, Dominic contacted Lucy to accelerate specific aspects of their ongoing operations. Brendan's death created both complications and opportunities for their strategy. While it removed a key witness, it also eliminated any possibility of future recantation or negotiated release. The next morning, Assistant District Attorney Martinez Juarez requested an emergency meeting with Dominic and his attorney before court convened. Mr. Vance, she began once they were seated in her office. I'll be direct. We've received credible information suggesting Brendan Trask's death was not suicide but a contracted killing. Marissa Gallegos, Dominic's attorney, leaned forward. What's the source of this information? Anonymous tip followed by corroborating evidence from prison surveillance that captured unusual activity outside Trask's cell block during the estimated time of death. We're investigating, but I wanted to warn you. This development may impact our case. You think Vanessa or Phyllis arranged it? Dominic asked, already knowing the answer. Suarez nodded grimly. We're looking at visitors, phone records, financial transactions, but more concerning is what this means for you. If they could reach Trask in maximum security custody, they might target me next. Dominic finished her thought. I appreciate the warning, but my security measures are comprehensive. There's something else, Suarez continued, her professional demeanor showing rare uncertainty. The anonymous tip came with documentation suggesting financial connections between Trask and individuals associated with organized crime in Las Vegas. The implication is that his gambling debts may have made him vulnerable to external pressure to participate in the plot against you. Meaning Vanessa and Phyllis may not have been the only parties with motive to silence him. Marissa suggested. Exactly, Suarez confirmed. We're expanding our investigation, but I wanted you to be aware. This case may have dimensions beyond what we initially understood. This development aligned with Dominic's own intelligence gathering. Through Hammond's contacts, he had already identified connections between Brendan's gambling debts and a network controlled by Anthony Pirelli, a semi-legitimate businessman with known ties to organized crime. What remained unclear was whether Pirelli's organization had been active participants in the plot against him or merely opportunistic creditors using Brendan's desperation for their benefit. As the trial resumed that morning, news of Brendan's death cast a shadow over the proceedings. Judge Whitfield instructed the jury not to speculate about causes or implications, but the impact was inevitable. Vanessa, typically composed throughout the trial, appeared visibly shaken. Whether from genuine shock or calculated performance was impossible to determine. During the lunch recess, Lucy provided an update on their ongoing surveillance of Vanessa's remaining contacts. We've identified 3 calls from the detention center to a burner phone activated 2 days ago. The phone's movements correlate with a known associate of Walter Dawson, one with a history of solving problems for Dawson's clients. Vanessa's getting desperate, Dominic observed. With Brendan's testimony entered into evidence but no opportunity for cross-examination, the prosecution's case is stronger, not weaker. She wouldn't risk arranging his death unless there was something specific she feared he might reveal under further questioning. Something not in his original statement, Hammond added, joining their conversation. My contact at the DA's office mentioned Suarez was planning to question Brendan about offshore accounts linked to Phyllis that weren't part of the initial financial disclosures. The pattern was becoming clear. Brendan's death wasn't just about silencing a witness. It was about preventing specific revelations about financial arrangements that might implicate others beyond the 3 primary conspirators. That afternoon, as Vanessa's defense attorney cross-examined the medical examiner about the paralytic used in the attack, Dominic received a text message from an encrypted number. Apparently wants to meet. Tonight, neutral location regarding recent developments. Hammond, seated beside him, noticed his momentary stillness. Problem, Dominic showed him the message. It could be useful to understand Pirelli's involvement, but the timing is suspicious. Could be a trap. Hammond agreed quietly. Or legitimate concern about exposure if the investigation expands to include his organization. Arrange it, Dominic decided, but with full security protocols and contingency measures. I want to know what he knows. The meeting was arranged for midnight at an abandoned industrial property outside Phoenix. Neutral territory easily secured and monitored by Hammond's team. Dominic arrived with a 4-vehicle security detail. Electronic countermeasures active and sniper coverage from Lucy's former military colleagues positioned on adjacent rooftops. Anthony Pirelli arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 bodyguards who remained with his vehicle while he approached Dominic alone. In his 60s, Pirelli carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to power. Not the flamboyance of a stereotypical criminal figure, but the understated authority of a man who had survived decades in a dangerous profession. Mr. Vance, he greeted Dominic with a respectful nod. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'll be brief and direct. Brendan Trask's death creates complications for both of us. I'm listening. Dominic replied, maintaining professional distance. Trask owed my organization considerable sums. His initial involvement with your wife and her mother was financial. A way to resolve his debts through access to your assets. When it escalated to attempted murder, certain parties within my organization saw potential advantage in allowing the plan to proceed. Pirelli's admission was delivered without apology, a simple statement of business reality. And now those same parties are concerned about expanding investigations. Trask's death was not our doing. That was arranged by Phyllis Westbrook through intermediaries. But it brings unwanted attention to financial connections my organization prefers to keep discreet. Dominic assessed Pirelli's candor. What are you proposing? A mutually beneficial arrangement. I provide information about financial structures Westbrook established that you may not have discovered. Accounts, properties, contingency resources. You ensure your considerable influence with the prosecution focuses solely on the attempted murder charges, not the broader financial ecosystem surrounding them. Why would I agree to that? Dominic asked, though he already understood the strategic value of the offer. Pirelli smiled slightly because complete destruction of your enemies requires complete information. And because your interest is justice for the attempt on your life. Not a crusade against business arrangements that never directly threatened you. The proposition aligned with Dominic's objectives. Protocol Cerberus was designed to systematically dismantle his betrayers' lives, not to wage war against organized crime. Tactical alliance with Pirelli offered access to information that might otherwise remain hidden, particularly about Phyllis Westbrook's decades of financial machinations. I'll consider your proposal, Dominic said finally, provided the information you supply proves valuable and verifiable. Pirelli nodded, seemingly satisfied. You'll receive a secure data package within 24 hours. Review it, verify it, then contact me through the same channel to confirm our arrangement. As Pirelli departed, Hammond approached from his monitoring position. Think he's legitimate? Yes, Dominic replied. His organization was peripherally involved but not driving the conspiracy. Now they're damage control mode. The information he provides will be accurate. He can't afford otherwise. The data package arrived as promised. Comprehensive documentation of financial structures established by Phyllis Westbrook over 3 decades. The information revealed a network far more extensive than even their investigation had uncovered. Multiple jurisdictions, elaborate shell corporations, and nominee directors creating layers of insulation between the Westbrook name and the actual assets. Most significantly, the documents revealed the existence of a trust established in Vanessa's name but controlled by Phyllis, containing assets diverted from the Westbrook family holdings before creditors could claim them. The trust, based in the Cayman Islands, held approximately $40 million. Resources Vanessa could access upon Phyllis's death or incapacitation. This explains their confidence, Lucy observed as they analyzed the documents. Even if convicted, Vanessa believed she had secured financial freedom once this trust activated, and explains why Brendan had to die, him, and added. His expanded testimony might have revealed this structure to investigators. Dominic studied the trust documentation carefully. The activation conditions are specific. Phyllis's death, permanent incapacitation, or her direct instruction to the trustees. There's no provision for activation if Phyllis is incarcerated. Meaning Vanessa gets nothing as long as her mother is alive and in prison. Lucy concluded. Exactly, Dominic confirmed. And Phyllis created no mechanism to access these funds herself while incarcerated. A significant oversight. With this new information, Protocol Cerberus entered its final phase. Hammond provided selected documentation to federal prosecutors investigating financial crimes, ensuring the trust existence became known to authorities without revealing their source. Lucy coordinated with financial intelligence units in relevant jurisdictions, flagging the trust for regulatory review. Most critically, Dominic arranged for Phyllis to learn of these developments. Not through official channels, but through carefully placed information provided to her increasingly desperate attorney. The message was clear. The hidden resources she had counted on for her daughter's future were now compromised, with no way to access them herself. 2 days later, as the prosecution prepared to rest its case, Phyllis Westbrook requested a meeting with prosecutors to discuss a potential plea agreement. The terms she proposed were revealing. Full cooperation and testimony against Vanessa in exchange for consideration during sentencing and specific provisions regarding her confinement conditions. The final betrayal was set in motion. Mother against daughter. The architect of family wealth prepared to sacrifice her only child to secure her own comfort during inevitable incarceration. When news of Phyllis's cooperation offer reached Vanessa through her attorney, the carefully maintained composure she had displayed throughout the trial finally shattered. In full view of the courtroom, she launched toward her mother, screaming accusations of betrayal before security restrained her. Judge Whitfield immediately called a recess, but the damage to Vanessa's carefully crafted image of composed innocence was irreparable. The jury had witnessed not a wrongfully accused wife, but a woman capable of sudden, uncontrolled rage, precisely the temperament the prosecution had described in their case. That evening, as Dominic reviewed court transcripts in preparation for the next day's proceedings, he received word that Vanessa had accepted a plea agreement of her own. Guilty to reduce charges in exchange for testimony regarding additional parties involved in the conspiracy. The web of betrayal had come full circle. Each conspirator now sought to sacrifice the others for personal advantage. Exactly as Protocol Service had been designed to achieve. Isolation, pressure, and strategic information release had created an environment where self-preservation overwhelmed all loyalty. As Dominic considered these developments, he recognized that the legal proceedings, while necessary for public justice, were merely the visible portion of his response. The true reckoning for his betrayers lay in the complete dismantling of their lives, resources, relationships, and future prospects. Brendan was dead, his betrayal ending in ignominious suicide with his reputation destroyed. Phyllis faced years of incarceration with her family legacy in ruins and her social standing irreparably damaged. Vanessa would serve significant prison time before emerging to find her financial resources seized, her social connections severed, and her carefully constructed identity as a respectable socialite replaced by notoriety as a failed murderer. The protocol had achieved its objective, comprehensive systematic destruction, but as Dominic contemplated this success, he found the satisfaction hollow, not because the punishment was excessive, but because no retribution could restore what had been taken from him. Not his sense of security in his own home, not his ability to trust those closest to him, not the years invested in relationships built on foundations of sand. True victory, he realized, would not come from his betrayer's destruction but from his own reconstruction, building a life where such betrayal could never again penetrate his defenses. Chapter 9 Reconstruction 1 year after the trials concluded, Dominic stood on the observation deck of his newly constructed home in the mountains above Flagstaff. The property, secured by the most advanced systems Sentinel Shield had developed, offered both strategic defensive advantages and a profound sense of isolation. From this elevation, the lights of the city below appeared distant and contained, like a separate world he could observe without engaging. The courtroom phase had ended with neat resolutions. Vanessa's plea agreement had resulted in a 20-year sentence with possibility of parole after 15, effectively removing her from Dominic's life, until they both approached old age. Phyllis Westbrook, despite her cooperation, had received 18 years for her role in the conspiracy, a sentence that at her age amounted to a life term. The financial penalties, asset seizures, and civil judgments had completed their financial devastation. Lesser players had faced appropriate consequences. Dr. Reynolds had lost his medical license and received 5 years probation in exchange for his cooperation. Petra Klein had disappeared into the Witness Protection Program after providing testimony that helped dismantle several criminal operations connected to the case. Walter Dawson had been disbarred following ethics investigations triggered by evidence Hammond had provided to the State Bar. Anthony Pirelli had honored his arrangement, providing valuable intelligence while remaining insulated from the broader investigation. The Westbrook financial network had been dismantled by regulatory authorities across multiple jurisdictions with assets seized and trust dissolved. The legal aftermath had occupied Dominic for months, depositions, testimony, and procedural requirements consuming time and energy he would have preferred to direct elsewhere. Throughout the process he had maintained his public persona of dignified resilience, accepting condolences and expressions of support with appropriate gratitude while revealing nothing of his private calculations. Now, with those obligations fulfilled, he could focus on rebuilding not just his personal life, but Sentinel Shield itself. The company had weathered the crisis, but Dominic recognized the need for structural changes to reflect his evolved understanding of security vulnerabilities. The perimeter sensors are fully operational, Lucy reported, joining him on the deck with 2 cups of coffee. In the years since the attack, their professional relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship, a carefully calibrated trust built on shared experience and demonstrated loyalty. And the new protocols for client verification, Dominic asked, accepting the coffee, implemented across all regional offices. Triple-layer authentication, background checks extended to 3 degrees of separation and continuous monitoring rather than periodic review. Lucy leaned against the railing, surveying the defensive perimeter below. We're using what happened to you to create better security for everyone we protect. Dominic nodded, appreciating the symmetry. From near destruction had emerged improved protection, not just physical and financial security, but a deeper understanding of human vulnerabilities. Sentinel Shield now offered clients protection not just from external threats, but from the more insidious dangers posed by trusted insiders. Heyman called, Lucy continued after a moment. The information package was delivered to Vanessa as arranged. This was part of Dominic's ongoing implementation of protocol service, ensuring his betrayers understood the full consequences of their actions even as they served their senses. Every 6 months, Vanessa received a comprehensive update on the dismantling of her former life. Properties sold, accounts seized, social connections severed, reputation permanently altered, not as cruelty, but as reinforcement that her actions had achieved the opposite of her intentions. And Phyllis' medical report confirms accelerating dementia. Doctors give her perhaps 2 years of lucidity. The prison has approved transfer to the medical wing as you arranged. Dominic had ensured Phyllis Westbrook would serve her remaining years in relative physical comfort, not for mercy, but to maximize her awareness of her complete failure. Her wealth gone, her daughter imprisoned, her social standing destroyed, and now her mind gradually failing. A comprehensive unraveling of everything she had valued. "Sir," Lucy said after a moment's hesitation, Haymont also mentioned that Teresa Maddox has completed her sentence for her role as the fake nurse. She's being released next week. Dominic considered this information. Maddox had received a minimal sentence in exchange for immediate cooperation, identifying the conspirators and explaining her role in administering the paralytic. During her testimony, she had expressed what appeared to be genuine remorse, claiming she had been told the medication was to help manage Dominic's anxiety before a difficult conversation about his health. Monitor her post-release activities, he instructed. No direct intervention unless she attempts contact or shows signs of reverting to criminal behavior. The same measured approach characterized his handling of all peripheral figures in the conspiracy. Those who had been unwitting participants or minor accomplices who cooperated fully had been permitted to rebuild their lives under discreet observation. Only the primary betrayers, those who had knowingly and willingly participated in the attempt on his life, faced comprehensive destruction. Later that evening, as Dominic reviewed security updates in his home office, he received an unexpected call from Harold Trask. The older man had maintained periodic contact since their courthouse encounter, providing context about Brendan's history that helped complete Dominic's understanding of the betrayal. "I'm clearing out Brendan's storage unit," Harold explained after brief greetings. "Found something you should have. His military footlocker contains things from your childhood. Photos, letters, that blood brotherhood certificate you two made. Seems wrong to throw it away, but I understand if you don't want it." Dominic considered the offer. The impulse to erase all evidence of Brendan from his life conflicted with the strategic value of understanding his enemy completely. "I'll send someone to collect it," he decided. "Thank you for letting me know." After ending the call, Dominic sat motionless at his desk contemplating the artifacts of a friendship that had spanned decades before culminating in betrayal. The past could not be changed, but it could be studied, analyzed for patterns, vulnerabilities, and lessons that might prevent future threats. A notification from his security system indicated Hammond's arrival. The former intelligence operative had become Dominic's most trusted advisor, his experience with human intelligence operations providing valuable perspective on motivations and loyalty. "Progress report on Project Phoenix," Hammond announced as he entered the office, referring to their initiative to fundamentally redesign Sentinel Shield's approach to client security. For the next hour, they reviewed operational changes, personnel adjustments, and technological developments that would position the company at the forefront of comprehensive security services. The experience of betrayal had been translated into expertise. A painful education transformed into professional advantage. As their meeting concluded, Hammond hesitated before asking, "Have you considered Teresa Fuller's application?" The question referred to a former military intelligence specialist who had applied for a position at Sentinel Shield, highly qualified, but with personal connections that raised potential conflicts. "Her brother works for Paralleli's organization," Dominic noted, distant relationship, but still a vulnerability. "True," Hammond acknowledged, but she disclosed it voluntarily, provided complete documentation of their limited contact, and offered unprecedented access to her financial and personal records for continuous monitoring. Dominic considered this transparency. "A range of personal interview. I'll make the final assessment." This represented his evolved approach to trust, neither naive acceptance nor blanket rejection, but calculated risk management supported by systems designed to detect the earliest indicators of potential betrayal. No one entered his inner circle without comprehensive vetting, continuous monitoring, and layered accountability. As Hammond departed, Dominic returned to the observation deck, watching the sunset paint the mountains and deepening shades of amber and purple. The beauty of the landscape contrasted with the calculated precision of his reconstructed life. A fortress of security protocols, strategic relationships, and contingency plans designed to ensure no one could ever again penetrate his defenses. Yet despite these measures, he recognized that complete isolation carried its own vulnerabilities. Human connection, carefully managed and continuously verified, remained necessary for both personal functioning and professional effectiveness. The challenge was creating systems that permitted such connection while maintaining sufficient protection against betrayal. The solution had emerged in the form of cynical core, an inner circle of individuals who had demonstrated loyalty through verifiable actions, who accepted unprecedented transparency in exchange for trust, and who understood that betrayal would trigger protocols more comprehensive than those Vanessa, Brendan, and Phyllis had experienced. Lucy and Hammond formed the foundation of this core group, their loyalty demonstrated through the crucible of the conspiracy and its aftermath. Others would be added with extreme caution. Each representing a calculated risk justified by specific value they provided to Dominic's reconstructed life and organization. As darkness fell over the mountains, Dominic activated the property's night security protocols, automated systems scanning the perimeter, thermal imaging tracking movement within defined zones, AI algorithms analyzing patterns for anomalies. The technology provided a framework of protection, but he understood now that true security required more than electronic systems and physical barriers. It required understanding human nature, the complex interplay of loyalty, self-interest, and opportunity that determined whether someone remained an ally or became a threat. It required accepting that trust was not a binary state, but a calculated risk, continuously assessed and adjusted based on observable behavior patterns. Most importantly, it required the will to enforce consequences when trust was betrayed, not from vengeance, but from the strategic necessity of eliminating threats and deterring future betrayals. Dominic Vance had emerged from betrayal not broken but transformed. His military training, security expertise, and hard-earned and wisdom combining to create a man who could never again be victimized as he had been. The paralysis that had rendered him temporarily helpless had become the catalyst for building unbreachable defenses around his reconstructed life. As he surveyed his mountain fortress illuminated by security lighting and protected by systems of his own design, he acknowledged that the conspiracy against him had failed in its primary objective but succeeded in fundamentally changing him. The man he had been, capable of trusting completely, believing in loyalty based on shared history, had died on that bed while paralyzed and watching his wife orchestrate his murder. The man who had emerged was stronger, more vigilant, and ultimately more effective, not just at protecting himself, but at fulfilling Sentinel Shield's mission of safeguarding others against the full spectrum of threats, including those posed by trusted insiders. It was not the life he would have chosen, but it was a life built on clear-eyed understanding of human nature and the discipline to act on that understanding without hesitation or remorse. In that sense, it was the perfect memorial to the betrayal that had necessitated it, a daily reminder that trust without verification was not security, but vulnerability. Dominic Vance had learned that lesson at a measurable personal cost. He would never need to learn it again.